My Cultural Identity Project. So a little bit about my cultural identity. So I'm American and Peruvian, but I was born and raised in California. I'm a 24-year-old female who enjoys math. See, there's me teaching. I speak English and a little bit of Spanish, but I'm not fluent in Spanish at all. My family and I would be considered middle class, so we do have money, to have a house, but I still need help paying for school, so, I have to get the grants, scholarships, loans, financial aid, all that. I am undecided about my religion, and my values are family, friendship, honesty, loyalty, being responsible, and having a positive outlook on life. So, role of culture in education. Growing up in California, I was always surrounded by a variety of different students in my school. Although we all might be learning the same things, as I grew up, I realized that everyone comes from a different cultural background. We all vary somewhat in how we live our lives, what we believe, what we value, how we behave, and how we learn. As a teacher, there are a range of different techniques I use in order to maximize learning for all my students. When teaching culturally diverse classrooms, many students may feel out of place, causing them to feel shy, have low self-esteem, or have low motivation. Therefore, it is important for me to create a multiculturalistic classroom. Studies show that ethnic minority students are 2 to 4 more times more likely than others to drop out of high school. This will not be the statistic in my classroom. In my experience with teaching and tutoring math, having my students do group work has greatly increased their self-esteem. They get to meet new people and therefore do not feel so isolated anymore. Additionally, if a student is not very fluent in English, then I provide them with different worksheets so that help them better understand the material being taught. For example, I added more pictures so they can visually see how to do a problem. This gives them more motivation to try since they can understand the material. It is also important to include students' cultures in the curriculum. If students see their culture reflected in the material being learned in class, I believe they will be more engaged in the lesson and feel included in the class. If for some reason all else fails, I will always let my students know that they can make an appointment to get help from me after school or class or during lunch. This allows me to get to know my students on a more personal level, which results in them feeling more comfortable around me in class. I have found that when these students come to see me, they're more likely to be engaged in class and ask questions. A person's values, or moving on to values, a person's values are things that are important to them, and everyone has their own unique set of values. The things I value are family, friendship, honesty, loyalty, being responsible, and having a positive outlook on life, like I said earlier. My values shape my personality as it does for everyone. My values have fortunately impacted my education and career in positive ways. I'm always honest with myself when I don't understand a certain concept. I will not say, yes, I understand it, when I know I'm confused. This will help me in my career because if a student asks me a question I don't know how to answer, I will try not to make up an answer on the spot. Instead, I can ask the class if anyone knows an answer, right? And hopefully there will be a Hermione Granger in my class that will know the answer. But if not, I can always tell the student that I will investigate their question more and answer it during the next class meeting. Next, I'll be talking about values, or continue talking about values. So being responsible has also helped me in my education and career. I make sure to manage my time so I am able to get all my homework and studying done, right? I'm not trying to turn back the clock like that guy is, although sometimes I wish I could. And as for my career, I make sure I am prepared for class. If I was not well prepared for class, then that time would be wasted trying to figure out what I'm doing, and then all my students would not get the full class time to learn. And lastly, having a positive outlook on life has helped me in my education and career. If I had trouble understanding a concept, I would not get depressed, right? Not like that student, although sometimes it's very tempting to just do that. I wouldn't get depressed and just give up. Instead, I would believe that I could understand it if I sought out the right help, right? Like getting help from teachers or my friends in that class. When I become a high school teacher, I will take this positivity with me. In the text, Multicultural Education in a Pluralistic Society, Golnick and Chin talk about how students in the lower ability group can learn at the same level as many other students with the assistance of an effective teacher. I truly believe this, and I will inform my students of this fact. This will hopefully motivate them to be successful in my class. Next, I'll be talking about ethnicity. So I believe ethnicity is essentially the cultural and social groups you belong to. Everyone's social and cultural groups can hold different values, traditions, languages, and religious beliefs. Ethnicity plays a big role in how a person views themselves and how they live their lives. My parents split when I was young, so my cultural surroundings would somewhat change depending on who I was staying with at the time, since my dad and his side of the family, who are white, were born and raised in the United States, and my mom and her side of the family were all mainly born and raised in Peru. So when I lived with my mom, she would make delicious Peruvian food for me, and she would always need to know where I was and who I was with at all times, right, to make sure I was safe. I would call her kind of like a helicopter mom. And also many Peruvians they're known kind of to be late, right? If you tell them the party starts at 6, everybody will be there at like 8 o'clock. Unfortunately, this would sometimes become troublesome in the mornings when I had to go to school, because I would be saying, "Come on, Mom, let's go, I'm going to be late for school," and sometimes I would be late. When I lived with my dad, on the other hand, he would just tell me to get whatever I wanted from the grocery store, such as TV dinners, so I kind of made my own food, and he didn't really care where I was or who I was with as long as I came back home at night. He is also very punctual, so I'm never late anywhere I go with him. I was never late for school whenever he dropped me off. So as a future educator, I need to be aware of my students' different ethnicities. Some students may not be able to completely focus on their schoolwork because they need to cook or get their own meals, right? Take care of their siblings, attend events with their families, and many other reasons. Some students may also be late to school for a variety of different reasons, and it may not be their fault. I will need to be understanding of this and keep in touch with my students as well as their parents to figure out what's going on so we can all find a solution. Students' ethnicities can also be assets to the classroom. For example, a student from China may have learned a different way of how to multiply numbers. He could show his classmates his way of multiplying, and students might understand that way better. So next I'm going to be talking about class. So a person's class or socioeconomic status is typically defined by how much a person makes in a year. Some students will be living in poverty, some in the middle class, and others in high class. Your social class affects how you are brought up, which helps shape your views and opinions about the world. Growing up in the middle class, I was sort of like oblivious to the views and opinions, oblivious to the fact that there might be other students in my class that might be worrying about money or having food or having transportation to get to school. I never really had to worry about these things, so I was able to focus all my attention on school. Right, so there's me just waiting for the class to begin, and then another student waiting for the bus and probably be late to class, right? I didn't really think about those things back then. So as educators, we should be aware of the fact that about 44% of the nation's children live in low-income families. These students might not be able to put their full attention into school because they might be working, which could cause them to be absent, or they might be hungry or tired, and therefore they'll not be able to concentrate well. It is especially important for these students to see their backgrounds and interests in the content, so they will feel included and therefore more engaged in the class. Another reason to keep in touch with parents is so they know how much work their student must put in to succeed in my class. Parents may require the child to complete chores, go to work, go to family events, etc., because they're not aware of how much time the child needs to succeed in school. I can also offer extra assistance during lunchtime or after school for these and, of course, other students. So moving on to language. I know everyone has a different dominant language or language they're most comfortable speaking in. My dominant language is English, which has helped me in my education since I live in a state where English is the dominant language. I never had trouble reading, writing, or understanding my teachers. This allowed me to learn without being interfered by a language barrier. I believe that having English as my dominant language has also allowed me to stay true to my identity. I was never worried about what my peers would think of me based on how I spoke. Instead, I focused on what I wanted to become, or who I wanted to become as a person. And according to Golnick and Chin, 1 in 5 of the U.S. population speaks a language other than English at home. In my career as a math teacher, I need to take this fact into account if I want to become an effective teacher. A strategy I can use to help these students is to group them with other students who can speak their language. This way, when they do group work with other students who can speak their language, they will be able to learn from each other. So it's important not to lower my standards for these students, but I may present the content in different ways for them. For example, I can include pictures in my lessons and do hands-on activities so they can learn the material visually rather than auditorially. So I guess my point is that every student is different, and as a future educator, I will promote equity in my classroom and show my students I care about them and believe that they can succeed.